you get to choose your different classes that you were doing. So it was slightly more modular than what we had. And there were loads of sports management and sports marketing classes. So I, went through and just picked every single one of them and really realized during that year, this really resonates with me, that I can actually connect kind of what I want to do professionally, but with something I really love. So that was fantastic. And so therefore, when I came back for my final year, I was already having ideas about where I might want to work, what I might want to do. So I think that year abroad really taught me, and also seeing Canadian and US sport firsthand was fantastic.
From Coordinate Sports, it's the Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders, and experts, and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Amy Lalla, co-founder and director of the LMP Group. With experience working in professional sport in the US and the UK, Amy develops a wealth of experience before co-founding her first residential camps with the creation of Let Me Play. The passion for using sport as the hook to engage young people and then to communicate, educate, and develop runs through all of the work of the group and is the core to its success. The group has now grown to become one of the industry leaders in sport education and community development. During the episode, we talk about Amy's early life and education, as well as the moment she knew the business would be a success. Enjoy the show. Okay, I'm really excited to welcome Amy Lalla to the show today. She is co-founder and director of the LMP Group. They're at the forefront of residential sports camps, employment initiatives, and alternative education programs, amongst other things I'm sure we'll find out. But welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you very much, James, and thanks for having me.
No, really, really good. I was just saying before, we're excited to have you on and looking forward to talking all things Let Me Play. As we always do, just to give a bit of insight, most of the listeners, I think, will probably know the company and have heard of one or if not more of your programs that you're running. But just to give them a bit of insight into yourself and get to know you a little bit better, if we were going to go back and look at your childhood and from a sporting context, is there one moment or early sporting memory that kind of pops out to you?
Yeah, certainly. I think it was probably when I was in secondary school and we had a new teacher join that started a basketball club. And at the time I played netball, I played hockey, and I was like, wait, this sport could really work for me because I'd be warm all the time that I'm playing it. And I went along to a practice, and after the first session I was like, this is the sport for me. And that was a really nice hook to have in secondary school. So I think probably I was year 9 or year 10, and it really gave me that boost to really understand that I felt like I'd found my sport and I'd found the one that I was really going to stick at.
And basketball wasn't widespread in kind of secondary schools. Whereabouts did you grow up? At what school? Where was your school? Was it London?
Yeah, so London, and not too far from where I grew up, and certainly the areas that we work in, certainly there's a really good crossover. So I'm from West London, from Acton, and went to a very local primary school that was literally, I mean, if you sidestepped, you could see it from my house, which was super handy. And then secondary school.
That normally means you were late every day, and normally the kids who live next door to school are always late to school, aren't they?
Yeah, unfortunately not for me. Like I think this must have been ingrained from a very early age. And even now my friends will laugh at me because I'm like, if I'm a minute late, I'm like, this is a disaster. I have to be on time. And then secondary school, I went to Twyford Church of England High School in Ealing. So yeah, that was a really, really good experience. And I think I have so much to thank both schools for. And I have a real affiliation with teachers because I know how much they influenced me and how they supported me on my journey as well.
Yeah, we always kind of talk about influences in school or sport, but what about, I guess, family life? Was sport a big focus for your family? And like, did you have siblings, and was it kind of competitive? What was the environment like?
Well, it was competitive, but I'm actually an only child, so I'm really lucky to have a blessed extended family. I now call them the United Nations because there's lots of us, and whenever we get together, it's a food fest, which is really great. But just within my household, both my mum and dad like sport. My dad probably more time spent with him with regard to sport, watch anything that was on the television. And today he's still a keen table tennis player and still beats me. And I think I'm good as well. But yeah,
that's the thing about table tennis. Yeah, you think you're good, and then when you play someone who is good, then you see how
you're like, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been slacking.
Nice. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so I suppose really sport was encouraged in my household, just in terms of being something really positive for us to all share in.
Yeah, and I guess talked about schools there. And would you say you were academic, or would you lean on the sports side more so? And like, what was the kind of journey through education and into, because we're going to talk about obviously employment and employability for education and alternative education programs, and hopefully we'll try and link the things together. But what was your experience around education?
Yeah, I would say I was probably academic. I think my household insisted on that. We put education quite high up in terms of really respecting the fact that we have access to it and to do as well as you possibly can do. But then I did have other interests as well. So when I was at school, I liked drama, I liked basketball, and it was really hard for me to try and compromise on anything. So I tried to just do it all of the time.
100% everything, yeah.
Yeah, it was no real bother for me because I was really passionate about these things. So if it meant, and I would get up early, go to school, do some practice. There was a teacher that would just join me to do some like shooting practice, get changed, then like do classes and everything else. So I suppose once I really found that love, it was really hard for me to say only going to do academic. I needed to kind of carry on and have outlets as well.
Nice. And then so you went on to university from school, etc. Where did you study, and was basketball a big part of your life at university as well?
Yeah,
It's got a strong network like basketball in the UK university kind of structure from all set up, isn't it?
absolutely. So I went to Swansea University, which was fantastic. And being from London, actually, I remember the journey when you went and visited lots of different universities. And I turned up in Swansea and I was like, there's a beach right outside. Like the university. I'm like, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, big check mark.
Yeah, like tick, this really works for me. And the course was great. And I did a year abroad in America or Canada that you could choose from. So that really worked for me. And the first thing I did was, join the basketball team, which again was a great social network and able to play at that level, which was really good to be able to do and travel and play at the same time.
So you studied with a view to obviously having a career in sport at that time. Were you studying kind of the classic like sports science? Like what were you looking at?
Yeah, so I was studying management science, and actually looking back, it should have clicked a little bit earlier that this is what I was going to do. But at the time, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? I was doing my degree and I was did my 2 years and was doing it just in the sense of, okay, I'm going to get involved in something, business, management, whatever that might be. Knew I loved sport, so why I hadn't connected the two was nobody knows. But then when I went abroad and I went to Canada for the year, and you get to choose your different classes that you were doing. So it was slightly more modular than what we had. And there were loads of sports management and sports marketing classes. So I, went through and just picked every single one of them and really realized during that year, this really resonates with me, that I can actually connect kind of what I want to do professionally, but with something I really love. So that was fantastic. And so therefore, when I came back for my final year, I was already having ideas about where I might want to work, what I might want to do. So I think that year abroad really taught me, and also seeing Canadian and US sport firsthand was fantastic.
And I guess the collegiate system is, I know we're probably going to talk about the camps, the residential camps and stuff, and it does feel like, obviously from an outsider looking in the market of what you do, it does feel like you've got that collegiate flavour on it in terms of the US and Canada, so definitely going to get to that. But you're looking at sports marketing, etc. Was that a case of, right, I've graduated now, I'm looking towards graduating, and I can see these opportunities for myself, or I can see I'd like to work in that role or for that organisation? And what were the steps from there to, I guess, your first steps into a career in sport?
Well, actually, what I realised was, as I finished my degree, the degree was going to say management science, but I knew that I wanted to do more sports management. So left it till the last day of university when I was trying to work out what is actually next. People are packing their stuff, and I was like, no. Actually, what I need to do is I need to do a master's, but actually I need the master's to bring together the sport and the management. And I remember flying in to see my tutor and just being like, I had this great idea. Why don't I not leave? And why don't I stay on and do a master's? And we sat down, we talked about it, we talked what that might look like. And I walked out knowing that I was staying on for a year to do a master's. And I spent that year really formalizing and networking a lot through kind of my dissertation with organizations that I thought I might want to work with in the future. And it was a research master, so that lends itself having lots of discussions like we're having today, but also meant that when it came to my first job, and actually it wasn't because I had approached them, but a friend of mine had gone and was working for this company and I'd already interviewed them. So
Awesome.
in my interview, I was like, oh, actually, this is what I've done in the past, which was, really fortunate. And that kind of everything lined up working backward. And my first job was then working in the US for a club that had 3 professional football teams.
Wow. So was this around the time of, sorry, when you say football in the US, do you mean soccer or do you mean football?
No, I do mean football. I refuse. Football.
So was this around the time of kind of MLS starting, or was that already in place? Was it kind of slightly different setup over there, right, for soccer and football?
It was just before the MLS and the teams, but it was already, you could see that it was coming.
Massive hunger for it,
massive hunger for it, especially the women's game, which was really inspiring. So there was a men's team, a women's team, and a development team. And then surrounding that was all the grassroots programs. But the games were a big deal. The games were a great atmosphere for like what you would say are kind of small teams as they were at the time. But it was literally throwing me absolutely in the deep end. I'm like, okay, so it's not just one team, but it's 3 teams, and I need to speak their language, understand that it's very different to back home, but the best experience I could have asked for.
And what was that role at the time then? Was that the kind of management role or marketing, or what were you doing for the...
So I went in as a marketing assistant, and then the marketing manager left within a short amount of time. And then
you took it over.
I took it over. Which was nice when you're in that position to be able to work hard and show that you do want it.
Yeah, was that overwhelming then? It sounds like you took it in your stride, or maybe you wanted that already. If you know what I mean, sometimes the first job or the first junior, like kind of entry level position, you kind of promoted quite quickly. It could be overwhelming for some people.
Yeah, I felt like it was a warm handover. So I remember when he told me he was leaving, and he was like, "But you can do this. You can do this." And so that was really nice to have his kind of support and belief that I would take the work that he had done and carry it on and build on it.
Curious, and I guess there's a gap to bridge for us, but in terms of going from where you were there to launching, founding Let Me Play, what were the steps in between? So you obviously out of the country at that time. Was there kind of a calling that I want to get back to London, back to West London and start something, or what was the kind of the steps that you went through?
Yeah, it was a really interesting one. So I was living in Boston, which is amazing. So again, I'm surrounded by like the best sports teams ever in terms of basketball, NFL, hockey. It was great. But I did have this reluctance to commit to living in America. I'm really close to my family over here. And that was a real pull. So as much as I loved life out there, I knew that eventually I wanted to come home. And as I went through that transition, I ended up working at QPR, working for them, which was perfect, and also was in my mind's eye from the start because it's right near where my mum and dad are from. Like, it's the closest football club. And I remember years before driving, I'm like, this would be super convenient to start my career here. And so as kind of transitioned, and I then worked at QPR for 2 years, which was, again, a fantastic experience. I think what was happening was that I was starting to realise that I had a job that I'd really coveted. I wanted to work in football and I wanted to work in sport. I wanted the position that I was in, but then possibly didn't want to be there doing what I was doing for the next kind of 10 years. And what I could see from the community work that we were doing, and QPR to this day has a great community programme, was that I was meeting lots of young people that were talking to me about what their ambitions were, what they wanted to do. And you're smiling because you probably know that I was still meeting people that were saying, I'm going to be a footballer in the future. And I'm like, great, where are you playing? And they're like, just in the park. how old are you? I'm 15. And I'm like, oh, we need to provide young people with backup plans, with ideas of what else they might want to do in the future if this doesn't work out for them. And I'd say that realization was where Let Me Play was born.
Yeah.
In the fact that I've had this calling to say, let's provide young people with every opportunity we can, the best facilities, the best coaches and role models and information, but let's also talk to them about having kind of plans for their future.
So moving it, like you've got that idea of, or even just the thought process of like, this is what I want to do. How does that go from that to I guess launching? And how did you launch? What was the first kind of Let Me Play development meeting, or was it a case of sit down, write a big business plan, or back of the envelope? How did it? What's the kind of origin story there?
Yeah, so there definitely wasn't a big business plan. I think it was much looser than that. I think the first thing that I did was I had this idea to do this residential camp, and I mentioned it to one of my friends that I'd gone to school with. And I was like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And he listened and he was like, you should meet a friend of mine who's doing the same thing in basketball. And I was like, what? Like, someone else thinking
competition straight away.
Yeah. And I was a little bit like, but I've met all your friends. Like, which friend is this? I don't understand. And he was like, listen, go and meet him. And his name's Matthew Lord and is the other co-founder of Let Me Play now. So we were introduced, we met, had coffee, we were talking about the same thing. I was talking about what I wanted to do in football. He was talking about what he was wanting to do in basketball, having done one camp already. And it was really strange because my first love is basketball. So we're having this discussion, very aligned, walked away, and we had another meeting after that. And we were like, should we just do this together? And that's how we started the business, by a couple of coffees and a chat over kind of values and what we wanted to achieve.
And it feels like, I was going to say, it feels like from that, obviously you're aligned, but not really worked together before. You got, obviously you're aligned on vision, it seems like, but not worked together, maybe not know each other's skills. So was there a moment where you kind of said, this is my skill set, this is yours, how do we divide up the company, equity, all that type of stuff? Did you get all that out in, I guess that some of our listeners be interested in that kind of those negotiations early stage before anyone knows anyone's skills and weaknesses, I guess?
Yeah, I'd like to say we did, but we definitely didn't. And in the first several years, we were very much working together, and I think very much kind of leaning towards the parts that we felt that we had strengths in. Today, it's probably more formal over the last 5 years than it has been. And I think that just speaks to kind of the growth, because a lot of the things in the early stages we'd just do together. We'd be like, okay, we'll do this. Great, we'll do this. And then we were like, we can't go to every meeting together. We need to work out who's doing what. And so there was quite a natural evolution came into play. And I think to this day, we still kind of play on our strength in terms of who does what, which is nice because you end up doing the stuff that you really enjoy. And lucky for us, they don't cross over too much.
Don't clash too much, yeah. So you launched with the residential camps. That was the initial idea when you were running those with basketball and football at the time. And when was this? Just to kind of get us on a timeline, what year was that the business launched?
That was 2004. And yeah, so in the first couple of years, it was all about kind of just doing residential camps. So life was great, right? So the busiest period was a couple of weeks in the summer, and then start planning.
Not much competition back then, or was there much? You kind of quite unique what you're offering, right? Or maybe not. I might be wrong.
No, I think it certainly there wasn't that much competition, and I think our focus in terms of our messaging was really different. So we didn't ever talk about being involved in elite sport. It was more about opportunity, and it was more about everyone having the equal level of opportunity and also then developing. So we then started after that a tennis residential, a street dance residential, athletics as well. So what we realized was whatever that hook for that young person was, we could take the camp format and really replicate it. At the same time as building their confidence and their self-esteem.
You mentioned that you're really busy for a couple of few weeks of the year, but what were the main challenges? Was it kind of recruitment, finding the best venues, or how, if you're thinking back to them, what were the things that you were, tearing your hair out about, or having sleepless nights over it back then?
Yeah, I think it was just such a different time that you didn't have the benefit of social media. It was a lot of handing out flyers in parks, going to tournaments, putting flyers on cars in car parks where there's events going on. So that part of it was hard, very hard to get the messaging out about.
Because you're national now, right? Or back then, was this just in and around London, the first few camps? Or you?
Well, no, all the camps were always outside of London. So the football camp at the time was based in Ascot and basketball was in Aylesbury. But actually what we found was that the majority of the young people that came from anywhere but London, because London had quite a lot of opportunity for people to play, whereas outside of London, perhaps that wasn't always the case.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So we were getting young people that were coming from all over the country, were flying in from different countries, and then airport collections was a thing, because again, we didn't have Uber at the time, so we'd have loads of people.
Yeah. That's right. So how were you getting the message? Like you said, pre-Facebook, like any mass social media or advertising or whatever, how would you get the message out to be attracting international participants there for that?
Yeah, that was solely through the website, but that was no paid advertising. That was just
people finding it, Googling for
people
camps,
finding
right,
calling us, and we would have, by the time a young person came to camp, we would have had like calls with the parent, lots of email exchanges, just making sure that it was actually an education for parents as well, to understand that who are you trusting your child with, and then also what are the safeguards that are in place, and how is this going to benefit them outside of sport? Because that was a big thing for us as well, like looking at the skill development that they were going to have from on the basketball, on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of rite of passage, especially someone coming from like going to an international camp or whatever. There's a lot to do as a teenager or whatever, leaving home for the first time maybe. When was it that you realised you actually, I know you had something because you were obviously passionate about it and it was, I guess, working and you were doing what you wanted to do, but was there a moment when yourself and Matthew thought, oh, we've really got something here that we can scale, or we can, does that make sense? Was there like a flash moment? Was it, we put the first camp out and there's 1,000 people trying to book on, or was there anything that you think back where you think, oh yeah, really it's taken off?
I think it was the point that we realised that we could transcend the kind of positive messaging that we had within the camp through to other programmes. So after we'd done camps for a couple of years, we were like, well, we can't like not do anything year round. We could take the same concept into schools and do after school clubs. We could take the same concept and work within schools, but with young people that were finding it difficult, that were struggling, that needed some kind of guidance and mentoring, because we had these fantastic role models that were working on our programs. Great for them also that they could kind of contribute to other programs. So I think it was as we kind of branched out of kind of sport, but then into formal education as well. And part of that was doing study programs at the time. We had one centre, then we had two, and then we had like 8 different centres. And then now specifically around kind of the apprenticeship programme as well. It feels like we've got the infrastructure in place now to be able to grow and develop all of the programmes at different rates.
Yeah, so it's almost like this vision or this messaging that your programs all carry is, oh, this is transferable, and then you can add it to most education settings, and get the benefit.
Exactly. And I think it was about, where do we see a need? Where do we see that this could have a really positive influence? Because it's one thing working with a young person, 5 days over the summer, but actually how powerful is it if we can then work with them throughout the academic year, or on a 10-week programme or on a study programme? How else can we influence and help to make a difference?
Yeah, definitely. So we kind of fast forwarded to today and where we are. What it might be a good point to maybe lay out the group. We've got the group structure, we've got the residential camps, where it all started. But what does, you touched on the study programme, apprenticeships, what does the LMP group look like at the moment in terms of infrastructure and the offer that you have?
So there's 3 different companies within the group today. So there's the original company, Let Me Play, that predominantly now trades as LMP Education. And within this organisation, we do lots of work with young people that need pre-employability support. So maybe the bracket that are 16 to 24, finding themselves not in education, employment or training. And I would always say that they maybe have like one or two barriers that are just keeping them back from kind of living their full potential. So we do some of that work there. And then also that's where our training provider business sits. So on the register of apprenticeship training providers, and do all of our kind of training delivery through that. We then have Inspire ATA, which was actually born out of some of the work that we were doing within study programs at the time. Essentially, it's a government regulated organisation whereby we can hire young people predominantly and then lease them through to host employers and then run their apprenticeship like that. So we would then choose the training provider. Sometimes we choose LMP Education, but actually we work with another 15 different training providers also. And then we help to kind of host and give that person a really good experience on their apprenticeship by helping to manage that with the employer.
And I guess that's just on that one, because that model's, I don't know if it's common in our sector, but in terms of you're almost taking in this sector, a lot of fragmentation, small employers, things like that. So they might want to take that burden of employing someone. So you're effectively taking employment and then deploying those coaches or those young people into a role, but you're keeping that consistency that maybe might not be there if they were to lose their role or move on. Or...
Exactly that. And I think it's that education piece as well. So lots of the people that we place are placed into school, and actually what we find is that once we've placed them into a school, even if the school might have said, oh, we might want them for a term, actually they get to know them and they end up staying for the whole duration of their apprenticeship. But it is about making sure that we've linked the education piece as well, because otherwise a young person might be, as you said, jumping from short-term contract to short-term contract, but this helps provide them with some consistency as well.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, and I interrupted you. Going on to the third business.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And the third one is probably where you'll recognise some of the programs we've talked about today. So that's within LMP Action, which is now a community interest company. So our residential camps fit within that. Then also our alternative education is pre-16 space predominantly. The work that we do on the holiday activity and food programme that we were talking about, and also what we would say is like local authority programs. So within the area that our offices are based, which is Hammersmith and Fulham, we always said that we wanted to give back locally and deliver programs to help local families, local young people. And that's been like one of the greatest honours to be able to have done that over the last 10 years. We've seen these young people grow up really quick. And as they've grown up, we've developed our programmes to help them with whatever stage they're at as well.
Yes, you kind of support them, and obviously then into employment afterwards. It's like the perfect, for you, it's perfect case study, right? Someone can come all the way through all of your programme. What's the vision for the future then in terms of the group? Do you have working on loads of different fronts? Is there somewhere that maybe yourself you're more passionately involved with, or you're day-to-day involved with, and outside of that, the kind of the group vision, what does it look like 3 and 5 years out?
Yeah, I'd say I still navigate back to, whilst I have to oversee all 3 companies, I spend quite a lot of time in LMP Action, just seeing what the core of the work is that we're doing there. And I think it's so important because actually when we see the impact of it, it really resonates and is true to why we started and why we exist. In terms of the vision, yes, we're really clear about that. We have the infrastructure in place in terms of how to kind of deliver these programs. And one of the things that's really important to us is that we deliver well. So we heavily invest in quality. We're really focused on making sure we're not growing for growth's sake. But what we would like to do is impact more lives. And I can probably think that the apprenticeship program is a great vehicle to do that. It's very scalable. So I would see that probably scaling at the fastest rate over the next 3 years. And then the other programs will grow, but not necessarily at that same rate, because some of them are harder to scale in whilst maintaining the quality. And if that's what we're saying is our kind of anchor, we need to just make sure that we stay true to that. So, for example, we operate in 3 regions for alternative education. I think it'd be a great success if we can do that across 6 regions. So we don't have to go from 3 to 30 immediately. But I think that some of the other programs just lend themselves to be able to scale a bit quicker.
Yeah, it sounds like you're building out the workforce to help you scale the other programs with the apprenticeship side. What from the apprenticeships angle, I know you said that's going to obviously continue to grow. How many apprentices do you have at the moment working in the organisation or with all the departments?
Yeah, so actually, just from a training perspective, in terms of how many we train, at the moment it's about 1,000 apprentices, and we would probably see that part of it scale to double quite rapidly next year. And in terms of our specialism is delivering apprenticeships within school. So we've kind of come full circle in terms of what we're doing. And 70% of our apprentices are based within schools. We still service kind of businesses and people across other public sector areas. But what's really nice is that there is this demand at the moment for teaching assistants. And what we think is that we've got some people that would be great to go in and help support schools. And at the same time, the schools can nurture them with their own values to make sure that they become part of the fabric of their school. I think it's just a great start for someone on their career to do an apprenticeship and make sure in whatever they deliver.
Yeah, I guess myself naive, I just thought it was just sports. So in terms of, is it across the board in terms of industry sectors, or I know you talk about TAs at the moment, but do you do all different types of industries?
Yeah, we do. So we do teaching assistant, we do business admin, we have people doing apprenticeships within libraries, as a lab technician, school business professionals. And I suppose the blend now is that, yes, we recruit new people in, but we also speak to our clients about, actually, can you upskill staff that you've got within the organisation that might need that haven't had that in the past. So it's a different kind of outcome, but it's so rewarding as well. So we have people that have been like, we didn't ever have this kind of formal training, and now they feel like they've got kind of new energy to go again.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the connection also within the group. You've got everything you're doing with Action, and you're doing such a wide range of apprenticeships. It's almost opening people's perspective to what's available, right? So it's not just, I'm doing this sports program, so I'm going to go down that line. But you can say, right, these are all the careers that we can help you get into, and all the partners we work with. So yeah, it sounds like a really great fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've always said that we really don't want to be prescriptive with a young person in terms of what their dream is. Like, you tell us and let us help to navigate how we can kind of help support you get there.
No, for sure. One question I did have in terms of your kind of this growth and obviously your focus on quality and recruitment, and maybe even from the start when you mentioned you've got really inspirational role models on those residential camps all the way back when you first started. What's your kind of approach to recruitment and building a team or getting the right people in your organisation? Because that, obviously with your reputation, that's key. So do you have kind of a way of doing that, or kind of an approach that you always take?
Yeah, I think one thing that changed for us a few years ago was that we started to be really clear about what our values are. And we did that through speaking to the staff team that we had at the time. We talked to them about what it feels like to work here and what's important to us. And as we've done that, the values, I would hope that anyone would know what our values are and what we stand for. We do values award. We're really clear about our culture in terms of staff are really good communicators. They collaborate well together. And I think in building and growing, what has started to happen is that we've started to attract like-minded individuals. And I think that what's happened also is that we've been very clear about our intention and what we're trying to achieve, and that we are ambitious for our learners. And I think when you're really clear about that message and what you're trying to do, then you tend to start to recruit people that are intentional also about what they want to do and what they want to be part of, because it is our staff, it is them that are delivering these outcomes, and it's important for us to share that with them, but for them to feel part of something much bigger as well.
Yeah, I'm curious in terms of, because underlying message, what you're delivering, obviously you're running an organisation, a business, commercial organisation, but you've got massive positive impact. Is there a danger sometimes in terms of, you could, when you notice the growth, I was going back to when you mentioned like this message resonated and you can apply it to other areas. Is there a danger of like you could apply it to other things that maybe might distract you, or people are going to come to you? So could you help us achieve this goal that we're trying to achieve? And we know that you guys do on the ground is going to help us get there. And you've almost got to turn them away because you're staying focused on your plan. Is that difficult? Or does that happen?
That I would probably say, probably in the early years, that would have happened. Like, we would have got quite distracted by getting quite excited about, okay, we could get involved in this, we could do
because you can help, right? Yeah, exactly.
You can help, like, okay, we can do that. And I think the part that we've got to now is that we're really comfortable with the programs that we deliver in terms of really understanding the fabric of how they support each other as well. And you were mentioning how one can feed into the other. So we wouldn't be in a position today necessarily without going up to our advisory board with a very clear case about why we wanted to go into something totally new. But I would say that Matt and myself are really focused, and the senior team, on making sure we take what we have now and grow those to be best possible programs that can have the biggest impact.
So you mentioned advisory board there. Can you speak to how you, I guess, developed that over the years? You mentioned back in the day, you and Matt just kind of going at it yourselves and like working off instinct maybe. Was there a point when you decided to create that, and also how did you recruit the people you have on there?
That was a really significant point for us. And actually, how it all started was because we applied to be part of a program where we could get mentoring advice from some high flyers in the city over the course of 12 months. And Matt and myself looked at this and we were like, this would be great, because actually part of what you need as leaders and co-founders, I think, is challenge. You certainly had that between us, wanting the best and really striving, but to have external people that were able to kind of, really have a look at everything. And I think you have to be really open to it, because whilst we kind of applied to be on it, I didn't ever think about the level of detail and the level of scrutiny that they would go into. And it was essentially having a board that they put together for you. The organisation is called Pilot Light. Really,
it just sounds like we'll try and link that in the show notes for anyone who's in that position, for sure.
Yeah, really useful. And essentially we had a board for a year, and then the year ended and we were like, actually we really enjoyed that process, and it really held us to task with having space to kind of think through things. And like there's many a times where you're just sitting and working on your kind of product and your programs, but actually to have external reflection was really valuable, so challenging. So it was soon after doing that program that we thought actually what would be really useful for us was to create our own advisory board that would be able to provide that to us. And it was great training. I think one of the pieces of training that I've done in this last, 5-6 years is all around kind of governance. You don't necessarily think about it at the start, but actually it is a skill, and how to be an effective board member is really important, and an area that I've certainly had to upskill myself on, and I think will continue to have to do so.
Yeah, especially obviously as you're just keep continuing to scale up, and a lot of the programs of like government funded, etc., is always going to be that requirement to have really strong governance, isn't there? So it's kind of preempted all of that growth. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things around your approach to leading the organisations, more like rather than a company angle, more for yourself. Is there anything that you've kind of almost picked up in terms of an approach that you've developed to how you go about leading the organisation, whether it's a philosophy or just an approach to certain things?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a philosophy, but I can maybe...
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Maybe James one day. I think that I stay true to my values in terms of, I think compassion is really important. But I think as a leader, you need to be able to make really kind of clear and complex decisions about what's best for the business and the organisation, and articulate and communicate that very clearly. So what's certainly been very important is to be able to be as transparent as possible with staff about where we are on our journey, what we need to achieve, what we'd like to achieve, so that everyone can understand kind of the stage that we're at. That's not that everyone has to share every burden decision that's going on, but I think communication is really, really clear. I think that we lay out a plan in terms of making sure that we do get the whole staff together 3 times a year, and we do tell them what's gone well, what could have gone better, but what the plan is for the future and what role they're going to play within that as well. And I think I like to think that I'm a good listener in terms of listening to the conversations, listening to what people are saying, and also what they're not saying. I believe that we have some incredible talent within the organisation, and that's young talent, older talent. People have been with us for a month versus absolutely years. And I really want to hear their ideas, and I want to hear what they think works and what we could do better. And I'm always like, listen, if we could do it quicker, if we could have a more efficient way to do this, you need to tell me, because I think that it is making sure that everyone feels like they can have input.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think, everyone's got that value, haven't they? Value to add or different perspectives.
Absolutely. And I think if you forget that, you're forgetting why you brought them onto the organisation, because they need to bring that talent and tell us the ways that they think that we could do it.
Cool. So, a couple more questions from me, and this one more around we always think about kind of high performing habits, you know what I mean? So if you're working at a high level, I was going to ask you if you're still playing basketball. Is that still a regular thing that you're doing every week, or is that your de-stress, your unwind time, or is there anything that you do regularly to kind of try and keep yourself working at that top performing level?
Yeah, so I don't play regularly, but strangely enough, I had a message like 2 weeks ago, and someone said, hey, I've got a group together, we're going to go and play today at 3:00. And it was like Saturday morning. I'm like, how do I rearrange my day?
Clear my schedule.
Yeah, and I did. I turned up there and I was like, this is so fun. Why don't we do it? So what's really nice is just having that flexibility to do it. She's now booked like, I think 4 or 5 dates for courts. And nice. I'm like, that's it. I'm lacing up. I'm back in. So in terms of anything else, try to surround myself with positive people, catch up with people that are doing different things, hearing their story, and just making sure that I'm engaging in other things apart from what I'm doing. And that's very hard to do. I love what I do. So you will regularly find me in front of my laptop, just working on things, thinking of things. But actually, I know that when I do travel, that's a great time. Also, because I always come up with a really good idea, I think, when I'm nice and relaxed. But sometimes you're so busy, you're like, I don't have time to relax.
It's just putting that distance gives you some time to your mind just to work in a different way. Ideas pop up.
Exactly. But it's just making sure that you get into that habit of doing that so that it gives you that reflection time as well.
I love that. Final question, we always ask all of our guests this one, reflection of your career so far and your journey. If you were going to go back and give yourself some advice straight out of college or school, university, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
One piece of advice, I would say to dream big. And I think I would say that on a daily basis now to the young people that I meet. I tell them to actually get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's in those positions that we grow. But I would just encourage that younger self to dream big and go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, I fully agree with that one. Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable means you're growing all the time, right? So, Amy, thank you so much for your time today and transparency and telling your story with us. We really enjoyed myself. So, yeah, thanks again.
Oh, thank you, James. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lovely meeting you.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.